got something a little bit fun for you today. We're going to open a box of Commander 2021. So yeah, we're going to take a look at some Commander 2021 today. And so this video is sponsored by MothershipATX.com. You can check out their website, link is in the description below, and you can save 15% on singles by using the promo code REPLAY. Anyway, Lauren was nice enough to hook me up with the box of Commander 2021 that I'm able to use for promotional purposes, so I thought it would be fun to crack open the Boros Precon and just take a look at some of the cards. I can give you guys my thoughts on them, so yeah, let's get to it. You guys can watch me struggle opening this box. Totally opened it upside down. If you guys will notice, there's an arrow on this box. Whoops. So I guess they're coming out like this. Anyway, let's crack this bad boy open. So yeah, we're taking a look at the Lorehold Legacies set. Pretty excited about it. You get a couple cool things this year. One thing that I like is that the deck comes in a box. I have some Commander 2017 sitting on the shelf that once you open the cards, there's like not really a place to put them back, and they're kind of just all over the place, and it's not ideal. So I do like that they give you this little thing, even though it's not like a permanent solution, at least until, you know, I figure out where I'm going to sort these cards into. So I do like that. Also, you get this cool little life counter. It's got 40 life on one side and 20 life on the other. So that's pretty exciting. Got the rules packet like we always do. Pretty fun. And of course we have the deck. The picture isn't as clear as I would like, but you know, we'll just roll with it. So our face commander is Osgir the Reconstructed, 4 mana 4/4 with Vigilance. And you can pay 1, sacrifice an artifact, target creature you control gets +2/+0 until end of turn. And pay X, tap it. Exile an artifact card with converted mana cost X from your graveyard. Create 2 tokens that are copies of the exiled card. Activate this ability only as a sorcery. Pretty cool artifact commander. Boros has long been awaiting a graveyard value type commander, and this thing is pretty sweet. So I haven't looked through everything that you're going to want to dump in your graveyard and make copies of, but any big artifact creature is obviously going to be pretty good. I'm sure there's a bunch of good value things you can dump in there as well. Even just like copying a Thran Dynamo is a crap ton of mana. So lots of cool things to be doing with Osgir. I do like the design of this card a lot. I think it's going to be a really fun deck to play. For reasons I haven't figured out yet, they give us this really, like, thick version of the commander. I don't know, I guess this is in place of the oversized ones that they no longer do, but yeah, it's like a weird, really thick version of the card. I'm not sure what those are all about, but it was in the pack, so that's exciting, right? Our second commander is Alibou Ancient Witness. 5 mana 4/5, other artifacts you control have haste. Whenever 1 or more artifact creatures you control attack, Alibou deals X damage to any target, you scry X, where X is the number of tapped artifacts you control. Pretty cool. So yeah, with this, you're going to want to have a lot of artifacts in play. Giving them haste is sweet. The damage is to any target, which is huge. So you just never know what you're going to need to shoot. Sometimes it's finishing a player. Sometimes it's taking down a planeswalker, sometimes it's shooting a value creature. Any target is powerful wording. Putting some death touch on there is going to be really good for fighting down creatures. And obviously, again, you're just going to want a lot of artifacts with this commander as well. Probably going to have a lot in common with Jorkadin, who is in this set, and I'm sure we'll see as we flip through the cards here, but I'm also excited about that one. I'm probably a little bit more excited about Alibou than I am about Osgir. I just like haste and I like burning things. Inferno Titan is one of my favorite cards, so yeah, pretty excited about that one. We do have some reprints in the set. 1000-Year Elixir, pretty cool. Steel Overseer, cool. Steel Hellkite, pretty sweet card, a little bit slow sometimes, but given it haste, definitely going to help a lot. Next up, Solemn Simulacrum, pretty OP, even though a lot of people call it overrated. It's really good in a deck that can reanimate it. Sculpting Steel is pretty sweet. Scrap Trawler, Mere Battlesphere is great. Key to the City is a really underrated artifact. I'm not saying you put it in every deck, but in the decks that I've seen it, it's very, very good. Duplicant is cool. Bosch is cool. Jorkadin is a commander that I've always wanted to build. I've never really made a serious attempt at Jorkadin, especially since I've started the channel, so that's one that I would like to play at some point. I don't know, if we have time. Once I get through Osgir and Alibou, maybe I'll build a Jorkadin deck. We'll see. I do have a feeling that like Alibou and Jorkadin are probably fairly interchangeable as commanders. But yeah, one that I've just always wanted to build. Pia Nalar, sweet reprint. Horde Smelter, decent little card. Hellkite Tyrant is a super sweet reprint. Those things are super expensive now. Hellkite Igniter, a pretty underrated card for artifact decks. I've definitely killed a few people with those over the years. Felden is a really underrated piece of graveyard recursion. Duretti is very cool. Combustible is cool. Chain Reaction, Sun Titan, second best card in white. Rout, absolutely love me some Rout. Cleansing Nova, very solid. And now we get into the new stuff. These are probably out of order, by the way, since I've already opened this pack. First up is Triplicate Titan. 9 mana 9/9 with Flying Vigilance Trample. When it dies, create a 3/3 colorless Golem artifact token with Flying, another one with Vigilance, and another one with Trample. So, little costly to get into play, but the fact that it does something when it dies means that just wiping the board doesn't solve all of the problems. So that's pretty cool. And a 9/9 Flying Vigilance Trample is a massive creature that you have to deal with. It's hard to block that profitably. There just aren't a lot of things to do that with. So, you know, usually someone might have like a spirit running around that might chump block. Trample isn't really going to do much for that. So, Triplicate Titan, pretty cool little card. Decks that want, what's the other one? I can't think of the name of it. The one with Encore out of Commander Legends that's kind of similar to this. Hey, if you want that one, you probably want this one. Wake the Past is a really cool design. Return all artifact cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. They gain haste until end of turn. Now, I really wish this said creatures. If this said creatures, this would be exactly the card that I want. Sadly, it does not, but if you build a deck around artifact creatures, then it'll do the thing that you want it to do. If I can find a way to turn my allies into artifacts in the graveyards first, that'd be pretty sweet, because I definitely need a Mass Reanimate in Boros. Next up, we've got Rune Grinder, 6 mana 7/4 with Menace. When it dies, each player may Wheel of Fortune. And it has Mountain Cycling too, which is also kind of cool. So in the early game, if you just need a land, it's a nice thing to pitch. Pretty cool. Wheel of Fortune, pretty powerful magic card. This will be a bit less valuable than something like Wheel or even Wheel of Misfortune, just because it's a dice trigger, which is just a little bit harder to control. It's a bit more mana, and one of the hidden benefits of Wheel of Fortune is that if you Wheel of Fortune around turn 4 or 5, people have usually played their lands and their ramp. Everything left in their hand is gas, so you're forcing them to discard their gas, and many times the hand they draw into is worse than the one they had. If you have a good hand when a wheel goes off, your hand almost always gets worse. Now, if you have a bad hand, it might get better, but I find like that early to mid-game Wheel of Fortune is really disruptive to opponents. The fact that they may do it does subtract a little bit from the card, but it's still a powerful effect, but definitely something to think about for an artifact deck like this. Lelia the Bladeforge, 3 mana 2/2 with haste. Whenever it attacks, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. Whenever you exile one or more cards from your library and or your graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Pretty cool little set of abilities. Might be tougher in red to exile a lot of cards. I know there's a decent amount of impulse effects, but most of them are like 1 or 2 at a time, so I think it would be rare in mono red to exile more than just a couple at a time. But in Boros, there's a lot of white cards that say exile a lot of things, so in a Boros deck, you can do some cool stuff with this. Next up is Curse Mirror, a 3 mana artifact that, as it enters the battlefield, it becomes a copy of any creature on the battlefield until end of turn, except it has haste, and it taps for red. This is really cool. I've been thinking about this card a little bit, and something as simple as copying a Solemn Simulacrum or a Farhaven Elf, a Muldrifter, anything like that is really cool, and then it turns into a Mana Rock after that. I think this is going to be a sleeper card in this set. I think this is going to be very solid for a lot of decks, and I'm definitely excited to try this one out. And the reason I say that is because I've used cards like Hate Mirage in the past, and usually there's 2 value creatures running around the table that you're just like, Hate Mirage, make a copy of them for a turn, and, you know, again, something as simple as a Solemn Simulacrum, a Farhaven Elf, all really good stuff. Next up, we got Battle Mage Bracers. This one's kind of cool. 3 mana equipment, equip creature has haste. Whenever an ability of an equipped creature is activated, if it isn't a mana ability, you may pay 1. If you do, copy that ability. You may choose new targets for the copy, and it's equipped too. So, very similar to Illusionist Bracers. You probably want this anywhere that you want Illusionist Bracers. Maybe a little bit mana intense, so definitely going to want a commander with activated abilities. It's going to be a narrow card, but there are definitely going to be some decks that really want this. I'm thinking about like Nin the Pain Artist, going back a ways in Commander history. Something like that could be really cool with Battle Mage Bracers. But yeah, probably any commander with an activated ability. You at least want to think about this, but it's definitely an interesting card. It would be cool to check it out. Audacious Reshapers, 3 mana 3/3, tap it, sacrifice an artifact, basically polymorph into another artifact. And it deals damage equal to the number of cards you reveal until you hit your next artifact. So pretty cool little pickup for red. Red hasn't really gotten a lot of effects like this, especially at like this quality where it just puts it straight into play. So there's definitely some tricky things to do with this. If you run a couple things like Pia and Kieran or something, like a creature that makes an artifact, and there's only 1 or 2 artifacts in your deck that are like Blightsteel Colossus or something ridiculous, then, you know, you can have a good time messing around with that. So this will be a pretty cool card. I definitely like what that's doing. Monologue Tax, this is the one that I've probably gotten the most questions on this spoiler season. It's reasonable. It's a 3 mana enchantment. Whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, you create a treasure token. So, like I said, I had a lot of questions on this. Based on my experience, I've played a pretty good amount of Mangara over the past year, and typically with Mangara, in the early to mid game, you're going to draw 1 card in a turn cycle. So I would expect about the same with Monologue Tax through your first 6 turns or so, depending on the speed of the game and the power of the table and all that stuff. But generally, there's a lot of like 1 spell a turn up until maybe turn 6, turn 7. So, you know, before that point, it's probably not going to do a ton. It'll give you a little bit of extra mana, but maybe it's true that even just a little bit of extra mana is really good. However, once you start getting into turns 6, 7, 8, and 9, that's where people are probably going to have a lot of mana to their name, easily able to cast multiple spells a turn, and that's where you're really going to get some benefit out of this. You know, it's a tough card to evaluate without playing it. I do think overall, your deck is probably better by running this than not. The thing with Commander is that mana is just so strong that anything that makes mana is going to help you. Even if this isn't the best at producing mana, it's still probably better than literally anything in your deck that doesn't produce mana. So it'll be an interesting card. I'm going to test it out. I highly recommend you test it out as well. It's just going to be one of those things that we all kind of have to get a feel on. In certain metas, it may be better than others. It's just hard to know. I would say that, like, it's probably not better than a Thran Dynamo or a Gilded Lotus, but being that white doesn't have a lot of other great options after that, it's probably your 3rd or 4th best multi-producing mana rock. My guess would be somewhere around the priority level of Hedron Archive, and I know a lot of people like to hate on Hedron Archive. It's not the best card, but it's also much better than people give it credit for, so it does sit in a very weird place like that. But it's going to be interesting, so definitely test it out, make up your own mind on it. I'll kind of give some feedback on it once I've had a chance to use it a bit, but it's certainly interesting. Next up, we've got Lorehold Clockworker Scholar, 3 mana 2/4, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to attacking artifact creatures you control. Whenever 1 or more artifact creatures enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. That's a white card that says draw cards on it. That's pretty cool. It does require that you play an artifact creature deck, so it's going to be a little bit narrow in its usage. But the prevent all damage to attacking creatures you control part is also really cool. That's basically the Iroas effect, and that's a powerful thing to have. Obviously, this is going to fit in really well with the theme of this deck, and also obviously you can build around this as its own commander. I don't know exactly where this is going to fit in the scheme of things, but it does have some powerful wording on it, so pretty cool little card. It'd be fun to test it out. Next up is Excavation Technique, 4 mana, demonstrate. Whenever you cast a spell, you may copy it. If you do, choose an opponent who also copies it. That's an interesting ability. Does make you think a little bit. Destroy target non-land permanent. Its controller creates 2 treasure tokens. This is a tricky card. Destroying non-land permanent is cool. Notably, it does not exile a non-land permanent, and for what the drawback on this card is, it should probably say exile a permanent, given the fact that they're getting 2 treasure tokens out of it anyway. So, as far as white removal goes, it's probably not the best because you're giving them something back and you're giving them treasure tokens. Like I mentioned already, mana is basically the most powerful thing you can do in this format. Now, if you're taking down their Elish Norn or their Shieldred, sure, 2 treasure tokens are fine. Have your treasure tokens. But again, if there's an Ulamog on the board or something like that, notably it does not exile, so that's a concern. The fact that you can copy it is cool. It's very interesting that if you copy it, an opponent gets to copy it. If there's an archenemy situation going on, this can be really good at taking down the archenemy. That may be the bread and butter use case for this card, so that'll certainly be interesting, but like if you're ahead, this is probably a bit underwhelming as far as removal goes, so it's hard to say, but try it out one time and see what you think. Maybe it's a little better than I'm giving it credit for. It's always possible. Dig Site Engineer, 3 mana 3/3. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may pay 2. If you do, create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature with this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. I like this because this is similar to a lot of effects that exist in blue. And white has kind of been an artifact color in the sense that they're really good with equipment. It's always seemed a bit strange to me that white has like most of the equipment synergy and very little artifact synergy outside of that. It always struck me as weird that like blue got all of it. It's fine that it's primary in blue, that doesn't bother me. It's just weird that like white has almost none of it. You would think, especially like the way that Esper was treated in Shards of Alara, that theming, and everything else, that white would have just a little bit more artifact synergy over the years. But yeah, this is a really cool card. I'm glad we have something like this. I think this can be pretty powerful in an artifact-based deck, so it should be pretty cool. Next up is Bronze Guardian. This one's interesting. It's a 5 mana star 5. Has double strike, ward 2. Whenever this creature becomes the target of spell or an ability an opponent controls, counter it unless they pay 2. Other artifacts you control have ward 2, so it gives a little protection to your other artifacts, and its power is equal to the number of artifacts you control. This is an interesting card because 5 mana is a crowded mana slot. You need to get a lot of impact out of your 5 drops. There's a lot of text on this card, but it's a little bit weird. Ward is definitely cool, but it's not hard protection. It's not hexproof or shroud like Indomitable Archangel or the Leonin, whose name I forgot in this exact second, but it's the 4 mana 2/5 that gives your artifacts hexproof. That's hard protection for your artifacts, which is fantastic. This isn't quite that, but it's also a creature that can potentially attack for a lot of damage. It's tough to evaluate. Now, it might get clogged on the ground, but it's also true that if you put a sword on it or something and give it some evasion one way or another, Luxodon Warhammer, you can probably punch a lot of damage through with it. So kind of an interesting card. My main question is, does this do enough as a 5-drop? Because there's always going to be a lot of competition for things to do at 5 mana. There's just a lot of powerful cards in that slot, like Archangel of Thune is a card at 5 mana that kind of ridiculous in most of the decks that it goes in. So, you know, just something to think about. Cavalier of Dawn is another one that's just like you can put it in any white deck and it's going to be good. So that's your competition. But in this deck, for example, it's at least worth trying out. Again, get some evasion on there. It'll probably do some stuff. This is the card that I'm the most excited for in this set. This is Archaeomancer's map. This is white mana ramp. 3 mana artifact. When it enters the battlefield, search your library for up to 2 basic planes, reveal them, put them in your hand. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, if that player controls more lands than you, you may put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. This card is going to be very good. I've been thinking about this card a lot since the moment it's been spoiled, and I've had some game situations come up over the past couple weeks where I'm just like, oh, I really wish I had an Archaeomancer's map in play. Because having played white for as long as I have, I fully embrace the fact that finding lands and putting them into your hand is a powerful effect. That's card advantage. But this card is also partially burgeoning, which is a powerful effect in green, in that whenever a land enters under your opponent's control, if they have more than you, you can drop a land into play. And that's any land. So the thing that makes this interesting is that this will continue to trigger throughout the game. It's not just the 2 lands that you search for. So even just thinking mono white, you have Land Tax, Gift of Estates, Tithe, and a bunch of other similar effects like that. There's a reasonable number of ways that you're gonna have more lands in your hand later in the game. And you get those 3 extra lands off a land tax trigger, this gives you a way to get them in quickly. And this is the type of thing that, like, in a turn cycle, if everyone's ahead of you, which is obviously a bad place to be, but if they were, this can get you caught up in a turn cycle. And that's huge. But you also think about adding a second color. If you add Boros, you get wheels. Blue, you get wheels. Black has a lot of card draw. Green is a lot of card draw, although green's probably not going to run this. But anything that's going to draw you a bunch of cards or put a bunch of lands into your hand one way or another, this thing is going to be very solid. The pre-order price on this thing is huge. I do think it'll come down a little bit. I don't have a crystal ball per se, but I would guess it comes down to at least 10 for a little while. That's my hope anyway. So I wouldn't buy them at 20 or whatever the pre-order price is, but I am very, very excited to play with this card. I think it's going to be very, very good. So can't wait to get going on this thing. Super excited about it. Next, the card that I'm probably the second most excited about is Angel of Ruins. So this is a 7 mana 5/7 with flying. It's an angel. It's also an artifact. And when it enters the battlefield, exile up to 2 artifacts or enchantments. And it has plane cycling too. So there's a couple things going on here. One, this is better creature removal than white ever typically gets. White creature-based removal just hasn't been this good over the years. It exiles 2 things, which is huge, especially with all the gods running around, and notably, it doesn't give them anything back. So much white removal, and especially like the creature-based stuff, it always gives them something back. This does not do that. And what makes it even better is that you can planescycle it for 2, just dump it into your graveyard really easy, or turn it into lands early in the game, and then find a way to pull it out any number of ways. So this is going to be good for artifact decks, reanimator decks, and for angel decks. You guys know me, I have an angel tribal deck. Oh my god, making a mess. You guys know me, I have an angel deck. I am very excited to put this in my angel deck. This is a very good pickup for that deck. The fact that it has planecycling means that it's kind of never really dead. You can always do something with it. The concern is always, I have a 7-drop in my opener. That's not a great place to be. A lot of things need to happen before it's going to be a card that I can use. Just planecycle it. So it's going to be fantastic for that. It's also probably going to be really good in like Abzan Reanimator or something like that. I think this card is going to be very, very good. I think it's a little bit underrated right now. I am very excited to start playing with it in some decks. See a couple lands right there. We see some artifacts. Some things you might expect in a deck like this. I think these could probably actually be a pretty good value source with Osgir. Meteor Golem, pretty cool. Ichor, same sort of thing. Huge Archive, definitely OP. Commander Sphere, Burnish Heart, also OP. Locket, Arcane Signet, kind of OP. Boros Charm, fantastic card. Thopter Engineer, pretty sweet. Faithless Looting, pretty sweet. Sanctum Gargoyle, a card that I've always wanted to use a little bit more than I do, but this is probably the deck for it. Return to Dust, still very sweet. I'm still team Return to Dust for most of my decks, especially 2-color and less. I like being able to hit 2 of the same target, which Crush Contraband does not do. But if I get to like Mardu 3 colors or more, I'll probably switch to Crush Contraband. But the difficult choice is always, do you run Heliod's Intervention over both? You kind of have to feel that out for each deck that you're playing, so it's just one of those things. Dispeller's Capsule, pretty sweet. Dispatch is a really good piece of removal in artifact-based decks. If you're going to have that critical mass of artifacts, you're going to have Metalcraft most of the time, Dispatch is really sweet. Darksteel Mutation is a card that I probably need to use more. This thing can solve a lot of problems. See that Golos at the table? They probably don't run enough removal. Darksteel mutate their commander, and your problems are probably solved, at least for a little while. Study Hall is an interesting land in the set. It taps for a colorless mana, but you can pay 1, tap it, add 1 mana of any color. When you spend this mana to cast your commander, scry X, where X is the number of times you've cast it from the command zone this game. So it can give you some extra scries, which is pretty cool. It does eat a mana to do that. You have to pay an extra 1, and depending on what commander you play, that can be a thing sometimes. So just watch out for that, but it's definitely worth trying out. It's certainly interesting. Next up is Lorehold Campus. Enters the battlefield taps for a red or white. You can pay 4, tap it, and scry 1. This probably isn't a best-in-slot land if you have a perfect mana base, but if you're running stuff like Stone Quarry and Windscarred Crag, this is probably at the top of the pack of those type of lands. If you're already running a bunch of the come into play tap lands, this is probably going to beat out a bunch of them. You're not always going to use that scry 1, but there might be times where you need it. So it's a nice upgrade over Stone Quarry. Even though the effect is a little bit expensive, you're not going to use it all the time. It does give you something late in the game if you're kind of running out of stuff or looking for a very specific thing. Next up is Rip Apart. This card's very interesting. So 2 mana, can do 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker, or destroy target artifact or enchantment. Gonna be held back a little bit by the fact that it's a sorcery, but it's a 2 mana piece of removal for 4 permanent types. That's kind of good. It's tough to evaluate because removal that hits a lot of different targets is inherently valuable. It's hard for me to figure out how much it loses by being sorcery speed and not instant speed. Probably in like CEDH, you probably have to want to be playing Boros CEDH, which, you know, many people don't, but I do. In Boros CEDH, I could see this being a thing. Do you want it to be instant speed? Yes, you want it to be instant speed, but 3 damage kills like most creatures in CEDH. You never know when you need to get rid of an early artifact, enchantment, whatever the case is. So I think it's going to be a pretty valuable piece of removal. I don't know if it's going to be a best in slot piece of removal for all decks everywhere, but it's certainly an interesting option. Next up is Reconstruct History. This one's going to be pretty cool. 4 mana, return up to 1 target artifact, enchantment, instant, sorcery, or planeswalker card from your graveyard to your hand. Exile it. That's a lot of value. That just does a lot of things. So this is the type of card late in the game that like you're just like, crap, I'm out of stuff to do. Let's get 4 cards back. Why not? I think this thing will be pretty good. It's just it's a nice like mid to late game value play to get a bunch of cards back. It's not truly card draw, but it's card advantage. So That's something. Should be pretty sweet. Here's one that's also very interesting. This one's tough for me to evaluate. It's called Secret Rendezvous. 3 mana sorcery. You and target opponent each draw 3 cards. If you're looking for like mono white card draw and you remove the artifact options that are available, you don't have a lot of options. Mangara is your best one. This is probably your second best one. Maybe Mentor of the Meek if your deck is built for it. But when it comes to card draw in mono white, you don't have a lot of great options. I think this is actually reasonable. In a normal game of Commander, one player is usually behind. So giving them 3 cards doesn't mean they immediately just win the game. Like if they're stuck on mana or something, they're probably just trying to dig for a land, and you letting them draw 3 cards may actually get them to that land and like may actually allow them to play a game of Commander. And sure, this kind of depends on like what are your goals? Are you just trying to win, or are you just trying to have fun with your friends and mess around and play silly decks? That'll probably play into the decision to run this card or not. In a high power setting, this is probably not where you want to be, just because against other high power decks, giving them a card or 2 can literally change the game. So probably better for like casual to mid power. In that sense, I think it'll be fine. Like if your opponent's deck isn't just going to combo out immediately, it's probably a fine card to run. I do think it's going to be a reasonable option, at least until better options are printed. So this card is probably a stepping stone to something greater along the way. I don't know that in 3 or 4 years we'll still be running this thing, but for now, it's worth giving it a shot, see how it goes, and you know, if you find that your opponents are just getting too many cards out of you, you know, just switch back to something artifact based, Skull Clamp, Mask of Memory, whatever the case is. But definitely worth checking out. We got some lands. We got a Battlefield Forge, Exotic Orchard, Slayer Stronghold, Temple of Triumph, pretty cool pickup right there. Command Tower, Darksteel, Cycle Land, Myriad Landscape, always nice to have those. Rogue's Passage, pretty sweet land. Cycle, Sunhome, Temple of the False God, and we've got a bunch of basics. Then we got some tokens here at the end. We got some treasures and some golems. So yeah, that's the deck. I hope you guys enjoyed this look at Lorehold Legacies. Let me know if you want me to go through the other decks. I've got the boxes sitting right here next to me, so not a difficult thing to do. If you like this video, you just want to get my thoughts on a bunch of cards, let me know. Leave a comment below, and maybe we can do some more of these in the future. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, feel free to comment, like, or subscribe. Thank you for watching. I want to thank my awesome Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome. If you want to help support the channel and vote on which decks I play next, feel free to check out my Patreon at the link below. Commander Replay t-shirts, available in orange and colors beside orange.